So I wanted to share a quick story about a young couple that I helped get into their first home. It's like 3 or 4 years ago. And, they had contacted me about, maybe a year after they got into their home and asked, hey, how do we pay this faster? They were a highly responsible couple in their 20s, actually still are in their 20s. But, one of the things they had mentioned to me in that conversation was, in 5 years, we want to buy a property in Mexico. And, they said it with such conviction that I was curious and I asked, so why 5 years? And they had mentioned, hey, we're only a few years into this loan and we just started overpaying principal. We want to pay this down and get a lot of the expense off of there and then maybe refinance and see where we're at then and see if we can afford it. And I asked them, because I remembered how much income they made then, and what their debt ratio was and all that stuff. And I remember they had good income for their age versus their expenses. And I said, so how much more in principal are you going to pay? And they said, well, we're going to pay that one extra payment per year, which obviously knocks out, 4 years, 5 years sometimes. Really depends on the rate, the interest rate. It's going to fluctuate those results. But at the end of the day, I asked him something and I said, let me ask you something. If you were to be able to overpay principal and that money went into a savings account and at the same time it drove down your mortgage balance, how much more would you pay then versus now? And they paused for a while. And when they started thinking about it, they were like, well, I mean, right now, because one of the two picked up a side gig that, just really crushed it and ended up making an extra $4,000 a month, in just monthly income. At the end of the day, they were like, yeah, we could overpay $4,000 a month if it was a savings account. So I thought about a product because there is an actual product out there that allows you to overpay principal. But when you do so, it's very similar to a savings account that if the what hits the fan, you can go in and get that money. So ask yourself, if you were to be able to overpay principal, how aggressively would you do it if the overpayment was a savings account that also drove your balance down on typically the largest financial burden that families have in America, that are right now, the staple is a 30-year fixed. So I wanted to share the results that I came up with this young couple. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, but the bottom line is I ran value on their house right now. It's $789. I think they bought it like $450. I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. So end of the day, the values here are just extraordinary for the last couple of years. They currently owe $367. I think I financed around $380 when we started. It is a 30-year fixed, and I locked them in at 3.75. So I got them a good rate for back then. That was before the rates got into the twos and COVID area. But they're 38 months or 3.2 years into their current loan right now, and $1,800 a month is their principal and interest payment. So I said to him, here's that one extra payment per year is $150 per month is $1,800 per year. Let's simulate you making an extra payment versus having a savings account loan that all your extra payments are savings accounts. One of the two clients makes $55.20 every 2 weeks. The other client, like I said, picks up $41.33 on a monthly business that she started. So the total deposits they're making right now into their checking account are $16,900. Average annual are $200,000, $203,116. So here's what I asked them. After everybody's paid, how much money do you have left over? Their answer was minimum $4,000, most of the time $5,000. So I submitted 25% savings, which was $4,231 that they had left over once all their monthly expenses were paid. Calculated results. They paid off their loan instead of, now keep in mind, they had about 27 years left on their current loan. But by making an extra payment per year, they brought that 27 years down to 23.6 years. And the total expense on the balance plus interest is $553,634. The amount of interest they paid at 3.75% is $186,093. Now look at the savings account option. Look at how much they saved, $115,000. Look at the total interest, $70,295 versus $186,000. Now, how is that? Well, it's because instead of $150 a month in additional principal, you're putting everything you got left into additional principal, which if your principal contribution is $400 a month and you pay an extra $1,000, keep in mind, you've just technically made 3 monthly payments, because monthly payments are principal when it comes down to multiple payments. Now, of course, I'm not saying you only have your principal amount due. I'm saying when you're overpaying mortgage, the principal amount is how many extra payments you're actually making right there. So if you take a $400 principal contribution up to $1,200, you've actually made 3 mortgage payments right there within 1 month. So that's 36 mortgage payments within a year. How much savings could you generate on that? And of course, the reason why we don't do that is because of the what if factor, because life happens. But what if it was a savings account? What if it was a savings account? Now, I went further with these guys. And I said, so curious, the place in Mexico, do you have a cost in mind? And they were like, oh, we looked around, just goofing around, about 150,000. And I said, did you actually see one that you liked? And they said, yeah, it was 157. So I went in here and I did a future one-time investment of $157,000 on the second month after they did this loan. So in other words, right away, saved it and closed it, calculated the results. Now, do you remember the 100,000+ I was saving in interest? Now I'm still saving 31,000 in interest. Instead of 6 years, I'm paying off in 9.3 years. I'm still reducing the interest to 154 versus 186. And now I've also included a $157,000 property in Mexico. This works out pretty good for the people that are making more on a monthly basis than they're spending. By all means, if you're living check to check, this is not the loan for you. It's not. I mean, the rate's higher on this loan. What's making it work is overpaying that principal on a regular basis, and it gets you to zero faster. So it's not really about interest rate. It's about interest paid. It's about accumulating an effective interest rate that's much lower than your fixed rate mortgage. And keep in mind, your 30-year fixed and 15-year fixed, those were created in the 30s, 1930s. What product do you use that hasn't been improved upon since the 1930s? This is not your father's Oldsmobile, people. It is a newer loan, and by all means, you gotta be open-minded just to understand how it works. But it does work, and it is math. It's nothing more than math. I'd love to be able to give an example and get as many people as possible into this loan where it could be helpful and driving down mortgage debt. Mortgage debt is higher right now than it has ever been, and there's a lot of great income earners out there that could flip the script on that. So reach out to me if I can be helpful, and I'll simulate your results for you.